David Ellefson, and you are listening to Rock Hard with Jay Conroy.
Hey, David, how you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You know, David, obviously the first thing I got to talk about here is your bandmate Dave Mustaine being diagnosed with throat cancer.
Right.
Major rock news, not to mention a shock to everybody. I saw you posted something on Facebook just a couple hours ago, still in awe of the amazing outpouring of love and support from my friend and bandmate Dave Mustaine. All over the rock press. You were quoted yesterday as saying, and I love this, you said, "I kind of feel bad for the cancer."
Well, look, Dave's a fighter, man.
Yeah.
And, Dave is a fighter. He's a survivor. And we're optimistic about the treatments and about the outcome. Like Dave said in his announcement, it's something that needs to be respected and treated, dealt with head on, which is what he's doing. You can't sort of dance around it. So he's like he does. He's not here to mess around. He's stepping up and going through into the belly of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, look, we're optimistic about the treatments and we're hopeful about the outcome. In the meantime, we've been working hard on the new album, and we're going to continue to work on the album even during this season, in whatever way, shape, or form that is. Look, we had to give a heads up that some shows are going to have to be canceled, and we felt it better to let people know sooner than later.
Sure.
About that. Hence the announcement. But yeah, look, we take it day by day, and certainly thoughts and prayers to Dave are much appreciated.
Yeah. Something fans are really happy about is Mega Cruise will not be canceled.
Yeah, well, that was one thing that we looked at, and we felt it important to keep that out there because the cruise is bigger than just Megadeth.
Right.
It's bigger because there's so many bands involved. It's also a destination vacation for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And look, in the best case scenario, Dave is healthy and we're ready to kick some ass. Regardless of how that plays out, or we're on the boat in some way, shape, or form again, that's all yet to, will kind of play itself out. But, let's all rally around the flag of heavy metal and the support that all those bands have been showing for Dave and Megadeth as of yesterday as well. So, better to keep some things in play because there's a way that everybody can participate and enjoy that. Even if it has to be modified a little bit.
Right. And you're right. The outpouring has been fantastic. And, myself, the entire rock world. I mean, I had people coming up to me yesterday that know I do this show, that did not know I was going to be talking to you today when the news broke. And they said, "Hey, did you hear about that guy from Megadeth?" I mean, not even like people that are into rock and roll. So, I mean, the news is everywhere. So, the outpouring is really good. And I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So that's a good thing. Now you are such a busy guy. It's not even funny how busy you are. I mean, you got a million things going on with a million different people. In fact, I saw you join Nita Strauss on stage the other night in Nashville to play Aces High by Iron Maiden.
Yeah. Well, I authored this book, obviously, which I assume we'll probably talk about here in a minute.
Yes.
And I bring it up in advance because the book is largely a story of my life of learning to say yes. Kiko happened to say, "Hey, I see Nita's here next week. We should run up and see her show." And so I hit Nita. I said, "Hey, me and Kiko are going to stop down." And she goes, "Awesome, jump up and jam." And she sent in, I said, "What song?" She sends a couple songs. I said, "Done, we'll do it." And I think that's a perfect example of when life reaches out to you, you're meant to grab it. You're meant to go along for the ride, And I learned that kind of the hard way years ago when I said no to a couple things. Right when Megadeth disbanded in 2002, I was unsure of what my future was going to be, so I didn't know what course to take. And rather than my good friend Al Petrelli, who was in the band at that time, said, hey, man, say yes. He had experience being a side man and doing a lot of different things in his career. And he said, say yes to everything. And sometimes you'll double book yourself and you can figure it out later, but better to be double booked than not booked at all.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that lesson. And that's really, what that story is inside that book is my life as a result of just saying yes. And so Nita is a perfect example. She's just like that. Hey, she's played Alice Cooper, she's a solo record, she's touring, she's kicking ass. This is what we do. This is what we do, and this is how we roll. And that's what we do.
You brought up an interesting point, because in my research on you, one of the things I ran across was you saying how when, Megadeth had first broken up, you were like on the phone looking for work saying, hey man, I need money. I gotta, so that sort of plays into what you just said.
Yeah. Megadeth was, we were in the middle of an album and a tour cycle, and, businesses don't always land on their feet financially positive at all times of their season. And that was a particular season when we were very upside down. And, look, I was young. I was 38 years old. I had young kids, I had a young family. I was not in any way ready or prepared to retire. So I had to get moving, I had to get moving on. And that's what I did. So, again, I learned that lesson, like, hey man, just say yes and go. Opportunity called because they want to hear you say yes. So just say yes and go.
Yeah, good lesson and good words. That is for sure. Does the entire rock and roll community now live in Nashville? Everybody lives in Nashville.
And it's funny because we were in Nashville for over a month, and short of running into Chuck Garrick, Alice Cooper's bass player, at a Kiko and Dirk went out one night. Kind of one of the only real rock and roll events that goes on there is this rock and roll residency.
Yeah, I follow it closely.
And the Don Jameson were part of. So we went up there, and I see Chuck Garrick, he lived there, and the guy from Best Pussycat, and you start to see that there's people there, and I know a lot of my rocker buddies who live there and have moved there in recent years. But it's an interesting town because it's not like you run into them at the Target or the Safeway or the Whole Foods or you don't just run into people. It's like everybody goes there to live there, but they kind of Phoenix was once that town. Stevie Nicks, Alice Cooper, Rob Halford, Max Cavalera. All three of us in Megadeth moved here. One of the guys from Bruce Springsteen's band lives here. So there's a lot of musicians that have lived in Phoenix over the years. And it's the same thing. You don't see us out hanging out. It's not like it's a hang. We come here because we work out on the road. But when we come home, we shut down, and we go off the radar.
Mm-hmm.
Nashville is very much the same thing, as much as it's a big industry town and has a huge music industry there. The established rock and rollers, and I'm sure probably even the established country artists, it's like everybody they go off the grid, man, when they come home. They want some private time.
So you have a new album coming out, Sleeping Giants, which features Tom Hazert, who is your business partner, your producer. I think he manages you. He helps you write your book. He's kind of your cohort there. And he does vocals for like 4 of these tunes, and you have so many people on this album. It is incredible. So correct me if I'm wrong about anything here, but you've got, on one disc you have, 4 of the songs, Vultures, Sleeping Giants, Hammer, and then another remix of Vultures, and If You Were God. Then you also put some of your F5 demos on this record.
Right.
As well.
Right.
Then on disc 2, there is actually a bunch of songs from other artists. People like, like Co-op and Mark Rizzo, Mark Slaughter, so many people on this album.
Yeah, what we do is, first of all, there's this. Vultures was a brand new song Tom and I wrote while we were out on bass tour. Tracked it while we were in Tampa. And that opened the whole idea of, I said, hey, I got these couple of other songs, Sleeping Giants and Hammer Comes Down, that I've never been satisfied with the lyrics and sort of the vocal approach. So take a stab at it, put something down, and let's record those. So we finished those up. up. And then when we started looking at it, I go, I talk about F5 in my book. We've got some great demos from when the band first formed. I'd love to include those. Plus, there's a bunch of stuff I wrote back in 1993 that includes David Glenn Isley and John Bush. I'd love to include those. So, it really kind of opened the vaults, and that's really what the album is me opening the vaults and really opening the whole side of my musical life of things that I've written over the years that haven't been released yet. And then, of course, as we do with everything with EMP, we include our other artists, to involve them, like we do that with Bass Story. We have EMP bands support us on the tour. They open for us and stuff. So that's where that disc 2 comes in, with having some of our other combat and EMP artists be part of this.
Now, tell me a little bit about Bass Story. You're going out on tour, and tell me and for the listeners, Bass Story is like, it's a Q&A. You also play live. Can you give me a little more details about what Bass Story is?
Yeah, it started with basically taking a clinic into the nightclubs so that people could drink beer, buy merch, and have a couple of support bands and feel like it was a concert, like it was a night out. And that's what we're continuing when we do Bass Story now in July, except we're also expanding the idea. Because now that we have this album here, we've got more songs to play from. And we'll tip and play a Megadeth track or two, just because, people kind of expect that. It's fun. But even those is going to change those up. But really the focus of this really now is the Sleeping Giants album. And because of there's all original material on it, to be playing and promoting that, and in between it, talking about the book, telling stories out of the book, making it really a tour now to support a book and an album. Look, the people love the stories. That's the stories are as much a part of the song.
Yeah, so people do love to hear the stories directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think even with playing new songs, people, that it's fun. They appreciate the song when they know there's a backstory to it.
Now, your first book, My Life with Deth, came out in 2013. Basically, your life story. And now you're coming out with More Life with Deth. Why did you do which basically is your life from 2000 and beyond?
Well, kind of 2010 when I came back to Megadeth. There's been all these really just a great season of my life with the record label, the coffee company, my all-star group I have, Metal Allegiance, and how that formed. Me and Frank Bello doing Altitudes and Attitude. Just this really creative season of business and music, and as well as all the successes that Megadeth has had since I came back, winning a Grammy, these things. So there's a lot of stories just in that. And when we secured the name Combat Records and we relaunched the label, suddenly I found in the story that took me back to the very origins and the beginning of Megadeth, because that was Megadeth's first record label. And so that brought me back to telling the story of how the band formed in our earliest years, really pretty much through the 1980s, which is a largely untold piece of history at this point, because you can't find that on YouTube, you can't find it in the magazines, it's just a sort of a bygone era. So it was a lot of fun to tell that story. And I think, my book is the only place where you can find all that. So it was really fun to, have that as a real cool piece of, my history, the Megadeth history, and something that I think the fans are really going to enjoy reading. And I also have a lot of collaborators and people that were there with me at the time, childhood friends, other musicians, Jay Reynolds, who was in Megadeth for a short period on So Far So Good So What, and Brian Slagle, who owns Metal Blade Records, KK Downing from Judas Priest, who was there with us, when we were touring with Priest back in 1990 and 91. The book is pretty wide, there's a lot of really cool, cool color to the narrative.
So much like the album where you include a lot of people, you did the same thing with the book, including a lot of people.
Exactly. I'm very much collaborative person. I'm very much I like to make music with people, to collaborate with them. And in telling the story, look, as much as it's my life story, I always like to invite my friends to the party.
Yeah. Kind of goes back to that saying yes thing. It's like you say yes.
Exactly.
Then you ask people, and they say yes. You get what you give.
Exactly. Very, very true.
Another thing I want to talk about with you, David, is your sobriety. You got sober, in my opinion, at a very early stage in life. You got sober at 25 years old. So you talk about how your faith plays a very big role in your sobriety, but it wasn't like, I believe you said something to the effect of, yes, you were raised, religiously, but you weren't overly religious. But when you got sober, that's when you really turned to your faith in God to help you get sober, stay sober.
Yeah, true story. I think, addiction was one of those moments in my life where I realized I was down to nothing, and there wasn't anything by my own human power that was going to get me out of it. And certain, people have these moments in life, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a relationship issue. Maybe it's a health issue. Could be a job or career transition. Could be something where you just go, wow, this is bigger than me. I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's and often, especially in America, being capitalists and self-sufficiency and be all you can be, and your value is tied to your earning power and your net worth and things like this. There's a propensity to pull us away from, as I call it, God, good orderly direction, the godly things of this earth, and move us toward the earthly things of this earth, and, so addiction was that moment that brought me to a place of I had to surrender, and it was interesting because I prayed to a God I didn't really know, I didn't really understand, and something happened. I was given the gift of sobriety through that. And, I get lots of times people, the other young music fans, they'll come to me and they'll say, man, I'm struggling with something. And I'll often just say to them, look, just try praying. Pray to a God you don't trust, you don't like, you don't believe in, and you really don't want to talk to. Just try it. You'd be amazed at what happens. Well, and it just goes to show that prayer works whether you want it to or not. So I think, when people say, oh, I'm praying for you, it's like, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And doesn't have to be something bad going on to pray. Hey, great. Times are good. Thanks for your prayer, And, sometimes I think it's like, oh, my God, the shit hit the fan. I'll pray for you. Well, rather than when all else fails, pray, how about pray first?
Yeah.
Just pray first. Just make that the first thing you do rather than the last thing you do. And it's a very different life. And look, we're all human, and I'm not professing to be perfect with it by any means, but I often find that myself. It's like, man, when I pray first rather than last, I have a much different day, than the other way.
It's very interesting. Yeah, be grateful first. I read that when you went into rehab, that's back when it wasn't cool, for lack of a better word. So you went in under the excuse of, oh, I broke my arm and I can't play type of thing. Is that true?
Yeah, there was a cancellation of the dates, and the public thing was, hurt his arm, broke his arm, got to cancel the date. And again, a lot of misunderstanding around addiction then, whereas now not so much. Now it's much more open. Of course, because some people can drink and party and even use drugs recreationally, there's a lot of misunderstanding around someone who can't, and realizing that, that while some people can be recreational, others actually have an illness, and it is that. It's an illness that affects us physically, mentally, and sort of corrupts us spiritually, which is why we fix it in reverse. We fix the spirit, and once we flip the spirit angle, it straightens out, the mental and physical take care of itself, and the desire to drink is gone, and we don't succumb to the action anymore, and we're free of it. And but there's a lot of shame around it, and coming out of that is a very difficult journey to come out of. the behavior from it can be very offensive, and it's very shameful. So to get out of it is tough, and I'm lucky to have gotten out of it because, and now the trick is to stay out of it. But easier to stay out of it than to get out of it. So
right.
I'm certainly thankful to be on this side of the fence with that for sure.
And I'm in recovery myself, so I totally get it, and that's why, this was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Do you do 12-step programs at all, or do you simply, I don't want to say simply.
I'm very much a 12-step guy. And very, for the purposes of anonymity, I don't say which one,
Mm-hmm.
but, as they ask us to, at the level of...
But you do meetings. Let me put it that way. You go to meetings.
But I do, yeah. And it's interesting that through the recovery process, that's what brought me back into a faith that I had growing up. And it's interesting, the Bible talks about, Jesus says, have a childlike faith. And so it's interesting that through it brought me back to that. The very wide door of recovery brought me back to a narrower focus of faith as I had growing up in the Lutheran Church. And that's why I did some seminary studies through the Lutheran Concordia Seminary, which I found very interesting because it brought me back to the narrative of the Bible, and it helped me understood that. I'd gone to college for a couple of years, and I was used to reading 2- and 3-inch thick books all the time, right? And when college ended, I went, okay, well, now what am I going to read? I'm kind of in the habit of reading. And I looked up on the shelf, and I saw the Bible. I'm like, I never did read that book. I should probably read it.
Oh, wow.
So I read it. And like a lot of books, especially those of spiritual nature, like that one, as you read it, it gets its hooks in you. It's meant to, It's an inspired word of God. It's supposed to change you, And so as I read it, it did it. It changed me. And it's been a really great journey now in my life, and it's a journey you realize you're on through your entire life. It's not a noun. It's not like a thing that happened. It's a verb. It keeps evolving. It keeps changing. It keeps developing. New awakenings happen as a result of it.
I am so happy to hear that because again, you got sober. I think you're very fortunate that you got sober at such a young age, because I don't know if it was you or somebody else said that, when I got into rock and roll and I started playing, there was no drugs involved, and I was having a great time. And I know I went through this myself, and there was no drugs when I first got into rock and roll. There was no drinking. I got into it for the love of the music. And then... afterwards, it's like you realize, hey, this is not what it's about. You can still rock and you can still love it just like you got into it in the first place when you didn't do drugs or drink.
Well, I had that same realization. I'll never forget the moment. I was sitting on my couch. It was a gray couch in my apartment in Studio City. We were getting ready to go in and start working. We'd written the Rust in Peace album, and we were preparing to go in and record it. And this was probably late 1989, and my sobriety date's March 1st, 1990. And I remember sitting there going, I don't even know if I want to do this, if I don't have drugs. And that immediately what came after me, and I make no mistake that this certainly came from a higher power, immediately right after that came the thought, you started doing this when you were like 11 years old.
Yep.
There was no drugs. It wasn't sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was just you and music and your bass. Mm-hmm. And you loved it for the pure enjoyment of it. And in fact, if anything, by age 15, when I started tipping the bottle and getting into all the drugs and booze, that's when that came in. That was quite a few years later after I'd been playing and had bands. And if anything, all that just got in the way and robbed me of my dream. It robbed me of my joy. And of course, the elusive lie is that, hey, if you just do this, you'll be great. So people told me, hey, if you do heroin, you'll be great. Look at all the greats: Jimi Hendrix, Joplin, Charlie Parker.
Right.
It didn't dawn on me that they were all dead.
Right.
From doing heroin. But that was the lie. When you're in the middle of it, it's like, hey, just do some of this and you'll be even better. And that's the lie that happens. And of course, I fell into that. Because, for me, once I opened that bottle, that door to that dark hallway, once you're down the hallway, you can't even find your way out. And so fortunately, the good Lord sent me the spiritual helicopter to lift me out of the darkness, and brought me out and set me back on the safe shore and debriefed me and, rebriefed me for the new mission of life, which was going to be one of sobriety and clarity and clear-headed, and the best years of my career happened since. We then went in and recorded Rest in Peace, and the rest is history, and that's all happened, the rest of my life since then has been through a sober judgment, and clear-headedness.
Again, your new album coming out, Sleeping Giants, your new book coming out.
Yeah, the books people can order through Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. All the online retailers will be carrying the book. And the album will be available at local record stores as well as on iTunes and all the digital outlets. And you can also order through the record company directly at empmerch.com.
David, thank you so much. You are a very enlightening person, and thank you for taking the time, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. Awesome. Yeah, talk soon.
All right, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.